Hello, this is Settle, and I'm happy to bring to you Tech Talk by GSDC, where we have amazing professionals sparking conversations on another level. On today's episode, we will be talking to CP Tham on the topic mental health in the workplace. Hi CP,
Hi,
how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you. Thank you for having me here today.
Thank you so much for being our guest. We're so honored. Would you like to introduce yourself to our listeners of this episode?
Sure. My name is CP, C and a P, easy for everyone to remember. I'm a HR practitioner based here in Singapore. Been
We will be doing this episode for the Tech Talk of GSDC podcast. And for today, we will be going through the topic of mental health in the workplace. So we have prepared a few questionnaires to ask you. So we'll just dive in right ahead here. So, first question for you is what is the link between work and mental health, and why is addressing mental health in the workplace important?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think it's always important for us to ask the why. As when we analyze the relationship, between different areas. Now, truth be told, is that today everyone spend a considerable amount of time at work. Right, in the past, without the technology that we have now, people can actually really truly disconnect from the work when they return home, right? But now I think it's getting it's almost impossible, right? One of the accessories, one of the things that we often have on us would be our handphone, our smartphone, and that's where all the email messages, WhatsApp, Slack, messages will come in from colleagues, from the bosses. So, truth be told is that we spend probably as much, right? If you look at it from totality, we probably spend as much as 12 hours, which is actually half the time that we have on Earth at work. So we definitely will have to look at, what goes on at work when we look at the mental health of employees, because it is really taking up a considerable part of their life. And on top of that, it's not just a time, right? Time is one quantity, right? I think what is that qualitative factor that we have seen in many research, right, over time is that individual derive their own identity and their dignity based on what they do at work. So if we don't recognize that, right, then of course the lack of identity, the lack of that pride, right, in what they are doing, and so on, impact on the mental health of the individuals.
Yes, definitely. We do have to keep on going through that. On that note, we'll move on to the next question here. What contributes, according to you, what contributes to poor mental health at the workplace, such as employee burnout, which of course it's a growing concern. So, what contributes, what according to you is contributing to that?
Yeah. So I'm a organization psychologist, or at least I'm trained in that area. And one of the things that we look at in psychology, right, is this concept of fit, or FIT, right? When we look at how individuals fit into the work, right, that they are doing.
Mhm.
So there are many different kind of work, right, or different kind of job roles. But essentially, right, if you look at it from the perspective of competencies, right, what kind of competencies will individual need to have? And again, competency is a big word, right? When we look at competency, is essentially looking at a mixture of skills and behaviors. Now, just focusing on the behavioral attributes, right? Now, from the standpoint of psychology, what gets individual to have certain preferences, right, in behaving in a certain way, right, comes from their personality traits. Right, come from this notion, right? Sometimes we call the personality profile of individual as their blueprint. So when individuals, right, are put in a situation where they need to, on a day in day out basis, right, repeat or demonstrate certain behaviors, right, they are not natural to them. That means they have to be very conscious, to demonstrate those behaviors. So I'll give you an example, right? A very simple one. Um, by nature, right? But the person could actually be in a job that will request the individual to be an extrovert. Being an introvert by nature and being an extrovert by the function, right, that the individual needs to perform, might create this burnout syndrome if this individual has to be put in a situation where he or she has to demonstrate the behaviors of an extrovert, right? Not just on the high frequency level, but also on the intensity level. So this lack of fit between the profile, the personality profile of the individual, the personality traits, right, of the individual, to what this person needs to perform on a day-in-day-out basis or demonstrate on a day-in-day-out basis, right, could lead to burnout. And we have seen this, happening, in the workplace, right? Individuals who are high performer, they can do their work very well, but as you progress them up the career ladder, right, suddenly they stop performing, right? Because they can no longer meet the demand of what the particular role will lead them to. And many a times the reason for that is that they're actually not a fit to the job that they're doing. They can perform, yes, but they get very exhausted, very tired. And therefore, there is this breaking point, right, where this person may move into an area or move past, the level where they can continue to do so, and they become burnout.
So it's like as you climb the ladder, the expectation also grows, and you have to keep on going into that expectation, right? All right. So next is, what are the potential consequences for both employees and also employers if that is neglected? Like, how can organizations prevent it, the poor mental health?
Yeah. So actually another area that has actually grown in importance and also in awareness, right, among employers and also especially employees, right, is this notion of psychological safety. Now, this word is actually not new, right? Psychological safety has been around for a while, right? It's essentially linked to how we manage, right, or we encourage a positive culture in the organization, right? It's very much linked to culture. But given COVID, right, that happened in the past 3 years, especially from during the time where everywhere else everyone was keeping away from each other, away from the workplace. What has been taken for granted, right, before COVID, okay, was the ample opportunity for people to interact in the workplace. So much so that sometimes people get sick of interacting with each other because they see each other in the office every day. But COVID turned that around, right? It got people to, to be on their own at home, right? Essentially, right? Leveraging on a virtual platform to still try and stay connected. So when that happened, right, a lot of the support structure given to individuals, right? When I say support structure, means the interaction, right? The conversation that people get into, right, in the workplace were no longer the same during COVID. So that has actually created, right, the issue is psychological safety. People no longer feel safe to be part of a group that they cannot identify with. Now, you will have heard of this thing called Great Resignation, right?
Yeah.
Just I think last year, during this period of time, Great Resignation was a thing. And many companies, many people were talking about it. What Cornell University did, right, was they actually went a bit deeper to look at individuals who have who quit from their job, right, almost immediately within the 6 to 9 months of the so-called end of COVID. And they realized, right, individuals who actually resigned, right, during the months that post-pandemic months, right, these were individuals who actually started their job during COVID. Means, in other words, right, they found that job, they joined the company, but they never actually set foot in the office. They never really identified themselves with the other colleagues because they just don't have the opportunity to do so, right, during COVID because of the lockdown, or in Singapore, we call it circuit breakers. Now, because of that, right, psychological safety, right, was a concern. And even when people started to return to work, it was no longer the same, right, because of what they missed out on during COVID period. So there was no surprise, right? Individuals started to leave the job that they went into because they don't have their identity, right? That they are used to, right, in previous jobs that they were in. So when you join a new job during COVID period, you probably won't have that kind of sense of identity. And sense of identity is not just about the employment pass that you receive or the lanyard that is given to you or the job title that you have, right, on that you can put on your social media platform. It's really the interaction, the day-to-day interaction, right? The day-to-day conversation, right? That individuals get, to partake in, right? In the workplace. So coming back to this, right? There's a lot of awareness now on of how individual can identify, right? Okay, the gaps in their sense of identity in the workplace, right? So psychological safety has a lot to do with the sense of identity. And if you look at it from the perspective of teamwork, right, it's a lot about the communication, right? It's a lot about the interaction between each other. So companies have to now pay more attention, to be more deliberate, and not take, right, the time and the opportunity that employees have back into office for granted, right? It has to be a lot more deliberate. Some companies have continued to practice, a hybrid kind of work environment, and that
Mm-hmm.
actually will require them to be really mindful, right? For the amount of time that the employees have together in a single location, right? How can they make full use of that to encourage, I would say, meaningful interaction and conversation with each other.
Yes, I do see that we have a lot of people who are working hybrid working conditions as well. Do you, in your personal opinion, like, do you think if having this hybrid working condition is good, or having a full-time office condition is better? What do you think, in your personal opinion?
This is a very political question, because there's no way, there will always be contrasting views on this. Okay, let me put it this way. I don't look at the meaning, I don't look at the word itself to decide, whether a hybrid works better, a remote, full remote work works better, or maybe even a full-time,
Mhm,
back in office kind of a work environment is better. I think what I will use to assess is, how much effort and how much resources.
mhm,
Maybe I should use the word resources. The effort is by the HR, right, team, but let's talk about the resources, right? How much resources would management be willing to put in to really curate the kind of environment, right? Be it whether it's virtual, be it whether it's in person, right? For employees to really have that meaningful conversations with each other.
mhm,
So maybe I dive a bit deeper into meaningful conversations, right? When I talk about meaningful conversation, it would be a mixture, right? It will be conversations where people exchange ideas. They find it safe to actually criticize each other. They find it, purposeful
mhm,
to talk about new ideas, right? And not just talk about new ideas, but they have the opportunity to implement the new ideas. And they have the opportunities, right, to even ask questions. Okay, I won't use the word question the leadership. Okay, that sounds very disrespectful. But it's about asking questions and to be curious about management's decisions, right? In
mhm,
certain things that, or certain policies or strategies that the leadership has put in place. And would the leadership themselves, right, those in the leadership team, be willing to engage the employees at a level where they are able to answer
mhm,
the employees directly, right? Not just sending out a general email message, right, and try to explain, having a cookie cutter way of explaining what has been decided, but really having that engagement with the employees, right, answering the questions directly. So you can do this actually, to be honest, in a full virtual environment, to be in a hybrid environment, to of course be in the physical environment. But what I will say is that, of course, having a full work in office environment probably is a lot easier to
mhm,
facilitate some of these activities. But even a full remote, right, kind of a work arrangement, that doesn't mean that the management cannot put in the resources to bring people together once in a while,
mhm,
right? If you have a full remote work from home arrangement, you are already saving a lot on estate, right? Estate
mhm.
cost, right?
Yeah.
The savings that you have, right, can be reinvested into bringing people physically together, and that's where this kind of conversation, right, will probably be best facilitated.
Mhm.
When you bring everyone together to a single location. So yes, I'm not a proponent of any of this method, but to be pragmatic, having meaningful conversation will be easier when you bring people together.
Correct. Yes, that's really insightful. Really, I did have a point there in your answer. There, you mentioned cookie cutter management. So, could you elaborate more on that, like how that is implied and how that would be a contrast to other techniques that you may use in the workplace?
Yeah. I think the workplace, right, has for many decades, right, focusing on efficiency. In fact, if you look at some of the organization excellence model, right, things like Kaizen, things like Lean Six Sigma, all these have been around for a while. All right, I mean, these are good models. Don't get me wrong; these are solid, good models that management or managers can look at, to practice, right, to look at driving their businesses or manage their operations. But for the longest time, we have been focusing on efficiency. Now, efficiency has one very basic denominator. Essentially, it's time. Right? We have been looking at becoming to be more time efficient, right? And focusing on efficiency than looking at being effective. Now, efficiency and effectiveness, actually, they are in conflict, right? If you want to be efficient, you probably won't be as effective because effectiveness takes time, right? It's almost like looking at process, right? The intent versus the impact, right? If you want to have a bigger impact, right, your intention, right, will take time, right, to happen, right? If you want things to be quick, you probably will not have any effective outcome. Now, why is it important that I personally feel, right, that I've also observed in the workplace is, number one, we are having a more diverse workplace, right? Now, of course, we all know that a diverse workplace is not necessarily inclusive, so that's another topic altogether. But we have a lot more diverse workplace today. Number one, because we have different generations working together. Number two, we have people from different ethnic or cultural background, right, that work together in the same company or even the same physical office for that matter, right? So to have a cookie cutter efficient way of managing people, where you can just pick up a book, right? There used to be this book, I can't remember the title, right? It's a good book, right? It served its purpose during its time. It's called the 1 Minute Manager Guide or something. So you just read the book, right? Okay. It's a very thin book you read, and then you can have some, cookie cutter way of, managing your employees. It probably worked in its days, in its time, right? When you don't have so many different profile of employees together, right? Those practices still form the core of what a decent manager will need to do. But I think when it comes to engaging individual employee, it's no longer about employee engagement, it's about employee experience. So if you want to create, if a manager needs to create engaging environment to maximize or optimize the experience that employee could have, right? A cookie cutter way of managing employees, right, will not work. So it goes back to what I mentioned earlier, right? When we look at personality traits, right? Everyone is different in many ways, right? We need to look at what will make the person tick, right? What will make the person, bring his or her full potential to fruition, right, in the workplace. And a cookie cutter way is not going to help in doing that. Okay. So of course, the demand for managers will be a lot higher, right? And I'm also an advocate. Okay, I'm an advocate where I don't believe that a manager, right, should have more than 10 or even more than 8 employees. You can't curate that kind of employee experience, right? If there are too many people, too many employees reporting to a single manager, it won't work.
So, what do you think? Like, how would these managers and leaders, how would they balance the efficiency, the productivity of their employees, while balancing their mental health and well-being as well? Because due to this hybrid working and remote working and such, what do you think is the best management way?
Well, stop being a manager, start being a leader. Right? Because manager manage the task, they manage the outcome, right? Start leading the people. So I think it starts with knowing your staff, knowing your people, right? Trust them to be the one to make things efficient, not you, right? You can't make the work of your employees efficient because they are the one doing the work. But what you can do, right, is to get to know them and help them to know more about themselves. And therefore, right, okay, what your relationship with them, right, will be very effective because that effectiveness helps them to be efficient in what they are doing, right? If every managers have to look over their employees' shoulders, there's not enough time, right? Okay, there's not enough time to be effective, and therefore, what do? You take shortcut, right? You take shortcut, you take cookie cutter way of managing your employees, right? So there will always be a shortfall, no matter how you try and manage the time. So I think it starts with the manager themselves, right? To stop seeing themselves as manager in a sense. I mean, the title can stay, doesn't matter, right? But
Mhm.
the concept, right? The mental model is really of a leader, right?
Mhm.
How much do you know your employee? How much do you know what they aspire to do? How much have you helped them to identify what they aspire to do, and so on and so forth? So it's a lot of that personal touch, right? That I think leader nowadays, right, we need to spend more time on. Let the employees be the one to worry about the efficiency, right? Your concern as a manager or as a leader is about the effectiveness, right? How can you bring up, right, the potential in your employees so that they can be effective and therefore be efficient in what they do.
Mhm. Mhm. Exactly. Sometimes there would be instances where some managers would be forcing their own targets, their own focus on their employees. Like even though the employees are not interested, they would be forcing upon them. So how do you think they would deal with such kind of situations?
Yeah. I think the notion here is that there are many ways to get things done. Many different ways. Now, of course, the job of a manager is not easy, right? I'm also a manager myself, right? So managers also will have their own managers, right? So middle management is actually, like a hamburger, you're stuck in between, you're being crushed by the top and the bottom, right? And I think what is crucial is really to talk about the why, the purpose, right? Now, everything that we do, whatever objectives that we set, right, or others set for us, right, as manager, maybe our director set for us,
Mhm.
we shouldn't be doing the same to the employees, right? Because as a manager, we should know better, right?
Mhm.
So one of the things that is very, very important for managers to, I feel, right, as a manager myself, is to always not pass the pressure down to the employees, because they won't understand,
Mhm.
right? There's a reason why you're the manager, because you're the mature one, right? You have gone through it, right? Instead of passing down the what, which is the result that your bosses want you to achieve, it's important to first talk about the why,
Mhm.
right? Talk about why, and then with the why, right, it will lead to the what, and of course we. So for us
Mhm.
managers, the what is the easy message, right, from the leaders. We can just
Yeah.
be a messenger and pass it down, but that's not what we need to do. What we need to do is to talk about the why, all right.
Mhm.
Make the what clear, and most
Mhm.
importantly, right, to curate or to create the how together with the employee. So how can they, right, based on the purpose that they have understood, based on what they are doing, and then
Mhm.
achieve the what, which in this case will be the results.
Mhm. Yes, that is very clear. Um, so according to you, like to in your own workplace as well, are there any best practices that you yourself have has applied in promoting like the balance, work-life balance? Also, do you have any workplace wellness programs in mind that can that you believe are particularly successful in the in any industry?
Yeah. So one of the practices, I won't call it best practice because I don't know whether it's the best, but it works for me, is to have regular check-in with my employees. So that's something that I will put in place, right? Even if I can't make it for the regular, so what I will do is I will put in the calendar a regular session with my employee. Now, of course, being a manager, sometimes my schedule can be, in a state of flux, right? I may be, needed to do something else, but I'll make it a point to inform my employee early, right, that I need to reschedule this. I will ask the employee to, come up with a time that I can meet, the individual, right? So let the person tell me, right, what would be a good time to reschedule the session, right? And I will always let my employee, reschedule it if they need to. All right, they don't have to really give me much reason for it, right? So if they think that okay, I'm really busy in my work, I can only talk to you later. Fine, just let me know. All right, preferably in advance, of course, and then just reschedule it, right? So there is this regular touch point that I'll put in place, that I can communicate with my employees. And the first, part of the meeting, right, would always be for the employee to tell me how can I make his or her work easier,
Mhm.
right? So the outcome or the result that you have achieved, we can do that later. But just tell me how can I make your work easier, all right? How can I
Mhm.
help you? right? I learned this from the servant leadership model that I gotten myself acquainted with, right? So servant leadership is about how you help people to be successful, right?
Correct.
So tell me what are your obstacles? How can I clear the obstacles for you, right? How can we work together to remove all these obstacles? Then we talk about, the achievement that you have done. Of course, if you are very proud of certain things that you have done, you want to first share with me, fine, right? You can do that. If not, let's not always talk about what you have done or what you have not done, but really, how can I help you in the course of your work? So that's the kind of sessions that I encourage managers to have, right? You should have at least once, if not every week, at least once one conversation with your employee every 2 weeks.
Yes, yes. Being inclusive in their working hours as well.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
CP,
That's
please.
very important. Respect employees' time. Yeah,
Exactly. Okay, so as we talked about having the employers connect with their employees, having a meaningful conversations, being involved, while also respecting their time. So, what do you think? Are there any trends and innovations that employers should be aware about to support their mental health in the workplace, and also let them know about some of these techniques and management ways that they can adapt uh, in their own workplace as well? Are there any such that you would like to recommend?
yeah. If I look at it from the standpoint that we are getting more and more technological savvy employees joining the workforce, right? Of course, again, I have to put in a disclaimer that again, there is no one size fit all right way to encourage mental wellness or to build that resilience in employees, right? Given that there are a lot of different generations, I mean, we have 4 generations of employees currently in the workplace. But if we are looking at it from, let's say, 10 years down the road, right, when some of the older generation of employees will have retired, and then we are looking at more and more technological savvy employees joining the workforce. I think one of the things I realized, right, I've been in a startup for a while, so I realized actually the younger employees they're very technological savvy, meaning, right, they will, very quickly find resources, online, right, using app on their phone, right, to do self-help, right?
Yes.
And I feel that that is something that employees can leverage on, right? To provide resources for employees, right, to do on-demand, interventions, right? So having access to someone that they can talk to, having access to, resources like a podcast or maybe educational videos, or even things like music, right? Music that could calm, right, employees when they feel anxious. These are things that could easily be provided to employees because number one, it doesn't take a lot of effort, right, to have a provider. Of course, money being one, but there will always be the ability for employees, right, employers, right, to look at engaging such service provider, right, and let employees have access to all these resources as and when they need it, right. So here is on demand, right? So that when employees need it, right, they can get it, as and when they feel they need to access some of these resources. Also, because we are looking at a generation of employees, right, whom, like a better word, we call them instant gratification generation, right? So when they want something, they want it here and now.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So and if you don't give it to them, right, they'll find it on their own anyway. And if they feel that, hey, I can actually find an employer who can give me something like this than my current employer, then they will very quickly feel that they're not being appreciated. So it takes very little, right, to actually, create that knowledge with the employees. Yeah. So I think all these online resources, on-demand resources, I feel will be increasingly important for employer to be able to provide and let employees decide, right, which one of these resources, right, will best be what they need, right, for their mental wellness.
Exactly, yes. All right. Thank you so much for such an insightful conversation. It was so fun listening to it. I'm pretty sure our listeners would be very delighted with with the conversation we had. Do you have any ending statement that you would like to give before we close this?
First of all, thank you again for this opportunity, and for those who are watching this podcast. Just be curious, right? I think if I can borrow the phrase from this very well known, I think it's an Apple TV called Ted Lasso, right? Is to be curious. I think curiosity will help us a long way, right? To be
Exactly.
good managers, right? To be
Yeah.
effective managers, and also supportive colleagues in the workplace, right? Be curious, have the open mind.
Yes, exactly. Curiosity brings a good leadership. Thank you for listening to this episode. We will be bringing even more exciting episodes soon, only on Tech Talk by GSDC.